whatever MOS, whatever you were doing, at that time we were all Marines doing the same thing. We were about to return to base one day, and there was a bazaar. If you could think of a bazaar, it would be like a swap meet, right? Somewhere that sells food and clothes and bread. So me and a couple of the infantrymen were, standing around the bazaar, and I look over, and my battle buddy Susan had this really nice fold-out book of her family and her son and her kids, and she grew up in the country of California, so she had big corn crops, and she was showing the kids, and they really loved to see that because it almost reflected to how they grew up. So I had seen a huge crowd of kids from the bazaar surrounding her and my linguist, my battle buddy and my linguist. So I thought, you know what, it looks like a good thing over there. She's got a pretty good squad over there. Let me go over there and go and help support and engage in these young children that are obviously going to grow up and be the new face of Afghanistan. So as soon as I walk across the street, boom. I want to say I felt it before I heard it. My initial reaction was, what was that? I didn't know if it was an IED, I didn't know what it was, but to take one glimpse back before I walked across the street, I was always trained that local nationals, being in that environment, being in the desert, are always dirty rather than clean. And so I had seen this man, middle-aged man, in garments that were light blue that looked way too clean, something that you had never seen before. You walk in the dirt all the time, your feet are dusty, your shoes are dusty, their clothes in that environment, they would have a little bit of sand on them or something. Something had caught my eye, something in my gut was telling me this situation doesn't look right. So he had a young child on his lap, and kind of the thoughts that were going through my head is saying, there's no way this could be what I think it is. There's no way that this could be possibly a suicide bomber, as this middle-aged man had this child on his lap leaning on a motorcycle. So I think that's what kind of my gut instinct saw, and I think that's why I naturally reacted to go across the street and move myself out of harm's way, because I think there was just something awkward there. So I had tucked myself behind a little shack, one of the little corner stores, and I had waited for the dust to settle, looking up at our FOB, our forward operation base, and thinking, what's next, what do I do, and where's my battle buddy? Right? I had one responsibility, and that was to bring Corporal Susan Welch home. And now her and my linguist were gone. I didn't know where they were, this poof of dust and smoke, and now I'm all alone, and I don't see any Marines. And at the time I was screaming and yelling, Susan, Susan. Obviously she couldn't hear, our ears were ringing, but it was just a natural reaction. I think I wasn't as ready as I could have been for this situation. So as I come around the corner, opposite side, the long way outside of the bazaar to come back, I see a Marine laying on the deck with a corpsman on top of him. And the corpsman obviously is not getting any response from this Marine. His legs are blown off. His body is burnt, looks like melted butter. You can tell in his eyes they have this glossy glaze that this Marine's already dead. And the corpsman's standing over him trying to get an IV and giving him multiple shots and asking me if I could hold the IV up for him. And I'm telling him, Doc, he's done. Doc, he's done. And the doc's still working on him. He's so focused on this where he feels like it is his sole responsibility. He would be willing to give his life, put himself in harm's way to help this Marine out in this situation. So as time goes a little bit by, I start seeing some Marines come to help. So maybe whether that's Marines from my patrol or Marines coming from the base to let someone else know, hey, hold this for the corpsman, this IV bag. Why go ahead and set security? So in my gut, I feel like we were trained to there potentially being a secondary because now we're vulnerable. Now our hands are tied. Now we're focusing on taking care of our injured Marines and the injured locals that we're really not paying attention as far as setting security like we were before the suicide bomber. So I started looking across the way, and there's a little canal, and I see some of the infantry guys butt naked assessing each other to make sure that their injuries aren't that bad. So thinking worst case scenario in my head that things couldn't get worse, but potentially they could, I started yelling at these Marines to see if they're all right. I started yelling at these Marines to get out of the canal, or if they needed help and they were stuck down there, because I didn't know if they had got blown into there or what it was, because that definitely wasn't the location we were when the bomb went off. So they had finally got out of the canal, and we had all kind of trickled and returned to base slowly as far as putting the injured Marines in the back of whatever vehicles the local nationals had. It had seemed like hours had went by in this situation, which I'm sure was minutes. And out of the bazaar, I had seen Susan with our linguist carrying him on one shoulder, like a buddy drag, like a drunk man's drag. And he was limping on his leg, and I noticed that he had an injury, I think, from the suicide bomber, had blown off a part of his leg, his shin. There was some blood there, and he obviously couldn't walk. So she had taken him up to the base and helped many more Marines up to the base. We also had another infantry guy that, again, couldn't walk. He had a leg injury as well, which Susan and I both, you know, again, drunk man's carry, each shoulder had walked up the side of this cliff where our fob was from the bazaar, and to see the looks on the Marines' face from other patrols that had came out and saw us and saw that, you know, we were just a Marine. We weren't female engagement team. We weren't, that didn't matter at that point. It kind of solidified the female, the male, the infantry, the whatever MOS, whatever you were doing. At that time, we were all Marines doing the same thing, working the same mission, taking care of each other. And so I think they were quite impressed when we brought one of their Marines up to the forward operational base and say, hey, this guy's injured, but we're going back down to assess the situation and see if anybody else needs help. So despite everyone's injuries, finally we get everybody up to the base. Another doc that was there on our base with us had done an assessment on us as far as like a mental health assessment as far as memory, reciting words. A lot of Marines were not okay. There was a lot of physical injuries too, that there was, you know, there wasn't enough help as far as medevacing everybody out, so it kind of went into, hey, who's the worst and who's the least worst, where they started pulling cots from people's tents where people slept to use as stretchers, because we didn't have stretchers for this. There was 71 local nationals that were injured, and we had a lot of Marines injured. One killed in action that day on the battlefield, and it was very impressive to see the unity and everybody come together. As far as, I'm not sure how this Marine had got up to the base since I had last saw him with the corpsman, but they had him on a cot, or maybe it was a stretcher, I can't quite remember, but with an American flag draped across him, with a Marine going with him in the helicopter to what, you know, I had never been in this situation, wasn't sure of the process of what they were doing, but at that moment, we had to say goodbye to our linguist too. He was injured. We had to put him on a cot. We had to take him to the helicopter, and they had asked us if we were okay or we wanted to ride with him. But at the end of the day, despite our injuries, whether they were physical or mental injuries, Susan and I had agreed that we were gonna stay, and that we needed to be strong and so support our team. We weren't gonna give up regardless. Every single Marine that day, we're trying to help these local nationals of whatever their injury was. So it wasn't a good day. It wasn't a win for anybody at this point. I think there's a lot of people that have gave their life and have served their country, just as I'm doing today, just as my linguist did, just as my battle buddy, just as many Marines did. Brothers, sisters, wives, daughters, whatever it is. Yeah, I think we all hold a piece of history, and I think we can understand that. And, you know, seeing the support of the community, and, you know, everybody coming together, the American flags, the tears, veterans that have served in wars before us, that we're trying to protect the homeland. You know, we all do it for the same reasons.